couple things.
Sorry.
All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the executive board meeting of MetroPlan, June 2nd, 2022. Let's start with the roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll start with you, Jim McCarthy,
I'm here.
Geronimo Vasquez. Does not appear to be present. Patrice Horseman,
Here.
Austin Aslan.
Presente por teléfono.
All right. Thank you. Tony Williams. Not present yet. Regina Salas
Present.
and Jesse Thompson.
Here.
We have MetroPlan staff, Jeff Miles Milbeck,
Here.
and David Wessel is not present. Rosie Ware, that would be me, present. Mandia Gonzalez.
Here.
And it does not appear that we have anyone else in attendance at the moment. So, Mr. Chair, that concludes the roll call.
Thank you, Rosie. Do we have any public comment today? I presume not.
That would be correct, Mr. Chair. No public comment has been sent in yet.
Okay, we're down to item 1D, which is approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any comments or suggested changes for the minutes from our May 5th meeting? I read them and I'm okay with them. Not hearing anything, I move that we approve the regular minutes of May 5th. Can I get a second?
Well, I'll second, but I feel a little unusual for doing that because I wasn't at the board meeting, but they look fine to me. So I'll second.
All right, well, thank you, Patrice. I did read them and I think they're fine. Any other discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Not hearing any opposition, that the minutes are approved unanimously. The next item Roman numeral 2 is our consent agenda, which includes two things this month, which is the Transportation Improvement Program and the Unified Planning and Work Program. Does anybody want to poll those, or should we just go ahead and approve those? I see Geronimo is now with us, Rosie.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you, Geronimo. We just barely got started.
Okay, cool. I'm on my phone, but I'm going to be hooking up my computer. So if I switch off and come back on, it's because I'm switching from phone to laptop.
That'll work. All right, not hearing any discussion, I will move that we approve the consent agenda as written, 2 items.
I'll second that motion.
Patrice Horseman, seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the consent agenda is approved unanimously. Now we're down to general business. And I think Jeff Miles is going to talk about where we might meet in the future and when and et cetera. So Miles, please take it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This item we've discussed a couple of times in the past 6 months, and it always seems timely to bring it back as things continue to shift with COVID-19 and the response of member agencies. So I'm recommending at this point that the board choose a location that we can commit to as much as possible for fiscal year 2023 meetings. And I think it's best for me just to scroll on down to the alternatives that are up on your screen. The first alternative, holding meetings of the executive board at the Mountain Line facility. It's a good facility. There's plenty of room. I know some concerns were expressed by the board of ensuring that we had enough room, to maintain some social distancing. And the Metro Plan board meeting is very small. So there's no cost. We can hold the meetings via Zoom, which is the technology that we are using now and that Metro Plan typically uses. The only disadvantage I can see is there's travel to and from the meeting location for attendance. Setup is required each month, but that's pretty typical. The second option is to hold executive board meetings at the Metro Plan office. That's what we've really been doing for the past several months. And the drawback, as I mentioned, is we can't have 7 people in there comfortably, even if there was no risk of COVID-19. It's a very small conference room. The third is to hold executive board meetings at City Hall. I do consider this one the least convenient. Space is less available, harder to secure. There's a cost. I'm not sure what that will be yet. And then the video call technology is set up via Teams. And since we use Zoom, that's just even another additional inconvenience, but certainly something we can do if the board wants to. And then finally, we can do 100% virtual meetings. I throw this one out there also because Metro Plan's likely going to be pursuing transportation demand management, encouraging people to work remotely as part of reducing carbon emissions and vehicle miles traveled. At some point, if that is our goal, if that is an objective of Metro Plan, we might want to walk the talk. But right now, we haven't even adopted that. So I put really the options in the order that I think fit from my understanding what I've heard from the board over the past several months, with one seeming to be the most viable. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you for questions and discussion.
Okay.
Hey, Jim, I have a comment.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm the chair of the Coconino Plateau Water Advisory Council, and I apologize if I missed this, if it's one of the options you mentioned, but I think it might be an additional alternative to consider. We are mostly sticking with remote meetings, but quarterly we are choosing to provide a hybrid option so people can gather in person. And that's just a way 4 times a year that we can connect in person, knock heads, eat some donuts, and have that additional intangible, in-person physical, magic that occurs while still remaining remote for the most part. And so I don't know if that was mentioned, but some sort of combination of physical meetings, but mostly meeting remotely might be an option too.
Of course, that would be, any person that wanted to, under the hybrid system, could just do it electronically, like we do at council. Every week, there's usually 1 or 2 people that attend electronically. Thank you, Austin. Any other thoughts or?
Yeah,
if you
I
wanted-
would,
Yeah,
I'll be
Trish,
happy.
go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Sorry. And by the way, I'm having internet problems here for some reason. Shouldn't be, but anyway. The only, and I'm, I'll be willing to go in any direction that the majority want to go on this, but hearing what Austin said, and, our, so far, the Board of Supervisors have really only gone to hybrid as well. And the concerns I have with hybrid is sometimes it's hard to hear people in the room. And it seems to me that in the hybrid systems, there is a diminishing sound quality between the hybrid Zoom folks and those that are actually in the room. And I've seen that just in our Board of Supervisors meetings, as well as here for Metro Plan. And, this is horrible to say, but I've really gotten used to the convenience of a virtual meeting. You don't have to travel. You don't have to drive somewhere and park. And schlep your things in. I know this sounds horrible, but, and I really love seeing you all in person, and it's really nice that things have opened up and I can see some of you in person. But it seems like the highest and best use of time may be to do regular virtual meetings and occasionally have an in-person meeting. Just my thoughts. So.
Thank you, Patrice. Other board members?
I'd like to speak. This is Jeronimo Vasquez. I agree. I think the hybrid meetings are here to stay. I don't think they're gonna go away. It gives the opportunity for folks that can't be in person to still participate in the meeting. With that said, I do also believe that the in-person meetings are important, and that, if we always have the option of hybrid, and highly encourage in person where possible. And maybe have once a year or once every quarter or once every semester an in-person only meeting, but the majority of it, I think, if not all of it, should have that option of hybrid, just because that's the way things are going. I feel Patrice's concerns with the quality of the video, quality of sound, and those are things that we're having to work through as we're adjusting and adapting to this hybrid modality. But I think we're not going to get away from it, so we might as well have that as part of the consideration in however we organize ourselves. So thank you.
Okay,
Hey, Jim.
yes, this is Jesse.
Yes, I'm fine with however we're gonna move about it, but I think a lot of people and myself have been very comfortable using the city hall. The spaces in between is big enough that whoever gets there, they would be 6 feet apart. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, and I've been to meetings at the Mountain Line, and it's probably a little less spread out than City Hall, but it's still a fairly big room. So, other comments? All right, it kind of sounds to me like,
Mr.
options-
Chair,
yes, go ahead.
Gina, yes, yeah, well, I would support continuing with hybrid, and with regard to a location, I do share, Mr. Thompson's, preference of City Hall, as it provides more space for distancing. However, the technology will require it via Teams. I know I know that will be challenge for staff. So maybe you could also consider hybrid at the Mountain Line facility to continue with the Zoom option. So yeah. And I do
guess
wanna, yes, go ahead.
I was just going to ask staff if, the Teams meetings go extremely well. Is it more problem for staff to set those up as opposed to Zoom?
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, we can do anything the board wants, period. And we just have adopted Zoom, and it's convenient to stay with Zoom. But if we need to switch to Teams, we can always do that as well. So I really would like to set these meetings up in a way that meets the needs of the board, and then staff will find a way to make it fit.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll just kind of see what my thoughts are. I don't like option 4 because that would imply, for instance, if we are mostly virtual and Jesse wanted to come to a meeting, which sometimes he has, that could be at the Metro Plan office, or it could be anywhere. So I think we should at least be hybrid, which should allow either option. I would be fine with City Hall, but I'm fine with the Mountain Line facility also. So where are we on this? Like, do we have a consensus then that, or at least a majority, that we can stay with hybrid meetings and then talk about where they're going to be as a separate issue? Or I'm hearing some people like Austin and Patrice saying that maybe we should not go to in-person meetings.
Well, and I don't want to say we should not go. It just seems like the, you know, that, a hybrid is fine. It does seem that there are some technological challenges with the hybrid. However, if there are people that really want to be there in person, I'm fine with hybrid. And as to where, we can, I guess, talk about that later. I understand that having to shift platforms may be difficult for MetroPlan, but not impossible. So,
can I clarify something? I'm not sure that everybody might have. I might not have communicated our system very well with the Water Advisory Council. We always have the hybrid going, but 4 times a year there is a physical gathering available for those who want to meet up. Those who want, that's still a hybrid option. So most people gather in person now, but we still have people who come in virtually, and they're coming in from all over the county too. So it's a convenient option for those who don't live in Flagstaff, for example. But the meeting, our monthly meetings, 11 times a year, are always hybrid. But 4 times a year, we go through the process of setting up a physical location and the Zoom or Teams infrastructure in a physical place. And usually, recently, we've been using the Public Works conference room that the city owns. So I don't know if that clarifies.
So 11 times a year, people can come in person, but, and it's always
No.
hybrid.
No. 11 times a year, the meeting is virtual.
Oh, only
4
virtual.
times a year, yes, 4 times a year, people have the option of gathering in person. It's
Okay.
a quarterly physical meeting that is also hybrid, but all the other meetings in the year, well, whatever, the other 8 meetings are only virtual.
Okay. All right, so where are we
And
going
it
on
seems to
this?
work pretty nicely. That option allows everybody to attend virtually all the time if they want to. Additionally, 4 times a year, folks can gather in person and compare notes and have those water cooler conversations that can be intangible and can be very important in their own right.
I see Tony Williams is with us. Tony, do you have any thoughts about our meeting formats and then also where we might do them?
I have had the unique experience, thank you, Chairman McCarthy, of serving on several boards and only having a Zoom experience on the board. So I have yet to have any in-person meetings in my time serving on this board or even on the Mountain Line board. I will tell you that, for example, today, the fact that I can access this meeting via Zoom has enabled me to participate because I'm in Phoenix and I've been here for 3 days participating in a training event with one of my student services teams. And so this means to have access has enabled me to participate where I would have normally had to have called in and said I wouldn't be able to participate in a meeting. So I certainly advocate for a continuation of being able to access the meetings remotely, because there are times, probably for everybody on the board, where this venue, either a hybrid model or a Zoom only model, most of the time with in-person meetings here and there, I think would be most conducive in assuring that we have quorum more often than not.
Okay. I would suggest you stay with hybrid because it's obvious that there is a need for virtual participation. And there have been times where a in-person has really worked better. I prefer in-person. I'll admit that. So can we say that we're going to stay with hybrid for now, or does anybody want to challenge that? If not, I think we're going to go hybrid. Now, the next question is, where are we going to meet? I would suggest either City Hall or Mountain Line, because I think, you know, to do it at the Metro Plan office, there's really not room for more than maybe 1 or 2 extra people in there. It's pretty small room. So I guess that gets us into which of the two. I did hear, I think at least 2 saying they'd prefer City Hall. I could probably go either way. City Hall is more spread out. What we could do is ask staff to talk to the city and see 2 issues. Would the city be willing to donate the time there and not charge us? I would be an advocate for that with our city manager. And the second issue is the teams. Would it be pretty easy to use Teams instead, or would that be a big hassle? If it's a big hassle, it's not worth it. But if it's pretty straightforward, then it would be. So,
Sure. Mr. Chairman,
Miles, do you want to kind of look into that some more, or have you already looked into it enough to have an opinion?
well, I don't want teams to be a deciding factor. What I'm hearing is either at the Mountain Line facility or at City Hall. If we can get City Hall without cost, that's where we'll do it. And staff will use Teams, or we'll figure out the tech. If it helps the board, if you wanted to just make the decision that we will hold meetings either at City Hall or Mountain Line and direct staff to try to negotiate free use of City Hall, then we can get to work on that. And our next meeting, we'll just let you know where it is.
Right, and that is not until September, so we do have quite a bit of time to look into it. All right, so kind of what I'm hearing here is we will do hybrid meetings, and they'll either be at City Hall or at Mountain Line. And Jeff, you can kind of look into the practicality of going to City Hall. If it turns out to be a hassle, then we can go to Mountain Line. Can we leave it at that? Is that enough direction for one day?
Chair McCarthy, if you don't mind, I've spoken to City Hall and Mountain Line, and I can give you my perspective. if
Please
now's a
do.
good time. So I have talked to Stacy at City Hall, not recently, but over the last year, a couple times about City Hall. And it sounds like they're definitely amenable to helping us. The biggest 2 things I can think of that would actually be an issue rather than Teams would be that we aren't city employees. And so we would need city employees there to support us, to log into the computer. We don't have computer access, which would be needed in order to run Teams. And that's the biggest concern that I would have at City Hall. But other than that, Stacy seemed, again, amenable to helping us and making it work. And I can definitely follow up with her over the summer and see if anything has changed. I don't see, and then I have also spoken to Rhonda Cashman at Mountain Line, and they were supposed to have their first hybrid meeting in the conference room that I'm not remembering the name of today, the Vera room, I think it is. But the TAC meeting was canceled. So the next meeting will be next week where they get to try it out. And it sounds like they're on a similar system as us. We're technically Mountain Line employees, so getting us computer access wouldn't be an issue. So it would streamline the process on our end. I think those are the 2 big things that I want to contribute to the conversation. like Miles said, we can definitely make it work however works for you. But that is the big difference between the two locations, aside from space. And then there's also the parking factor. We aren't city employees anymore, and people attending the meeting might not have parking access. So that's a concern as well. Whereas at Mountain Line, there is no parking. Yeah, that's right. That was my other thing I'd like to add. And that's all I want to contribute. Thank you.
Well, you contributed a lot. Thank you. It kind of sounds like it might make a lot more sense to go to Mountain Line. The only advantage of the city is we're a little more spread out. So hate to belabor this any longer, but should we leave this up to the staff to look into? I don't think we should be paying. If we had to pay a city employee to sit there through our meeting, that's probably an unnecessary expense. If it's a matter of just logging in, I'm a city employee, I can log in.
If I may,
Please.
at the risk of really belaboring this way too long, I don't think we should be paying for it. I don't think we should be going into an environment that's going to require city staff to utilize it for hybrid purposes. I don't think that we really have that many people that are showing up for live in person. I think a lot of people are continuing to work remotely and enter virtually. So I don't think it has been a problem, but correct me if I'm wrong, Miles or Jim, to have the 3 or 4 people who have wanted to be there in person, and the rest of us virtually. So I don't have any problem leaving this to the staff. On the other hand, I think it's pretty self-evident that rather than worry about parking, rather than worrying about having city staff there for a hybrid meeting, rather than having to pay a cost, rather than trying to get to the city manager and have him or not waive any costs that might be associated with it, why don't we do it hybrid? Why don't we meet anybody who wants to be there in person in the Metro Plan meeting room? And if it's not enough or we need more space, we can revisit it at that time. That's my 2 cents worth.
Oh, you're suggesting do it at Mountain Line, and if I heard you correctly. And I'll also point out,
Or Metro Plan, either one, but Metro Plan probably works. Then the Metro Plan staff is there. They know the hybrid technology. So I apologize. I think we should do it at Metro Plan. If Metro Plan is not big enough, which it hasn't been a problem to my knowledge to date, but if it's not big enough because more people are showing up for in-person meetings, then I think we should take a look at Metro Plan. Those are my thoughts.
okay. And in either case, since half of us will probably be virtual, there's not a big issue of crowding. All right, so I'm going to propose that we do hybrid meetings and we do them either at Metro Plan or a Mountain Line, and let staff make that decision based on how many people they think are going to show up. Should we go around, or can everyone live with that? Or is there anyone that would not like that option? All right, I think.
Jeff, yeah, I'm
Yes.
good with it. I'm
Okay.
good with it.
I'm not hearing anybody else, so.
I'm fine with it too.
Okay, I think we finally came to a conclusion. The only thing that's still remaining is we're going to leave it up to staff if it's at Metro Plan or at Mountain Line. All right, sorry that took so long. It's probably my poor leadership. All right, we'll move on then to federal and state funding, and Miles is going to do this for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I want to recognize that Kevin Adams with the Rural Transportation Advocacy Council is in the Zoom room. And as I go through my presentation, if there are questions or discussion, I know I worked with Kevin for quite a while. He'll be happy to engage and provide information. And I'll just start going through this report that's up on the screen, and an update or a continuation of House Bill 2396, which was to provide $50 million to Greater Arizona. It went through a process where the funding was objected to, local funding, local projects. So we moved to state projects, and then there was some discussion about that. And at this point, the Senate President had indicated she really liked the idea of a less expensive list of local projects, and the effort is still underway for funding to come to local projects at $50 million statewide, and that would be $2.6 million to the Flagstaff area for the Lone Tree Corridor, if successful. And before I move on to the next place,
Miles, you're kind of cutting out. Maybe you could get,
some news to add.
Miles, could you get closer to your mic? You're cutting out.
I want to just keep.
You're kind of cutting in and out. Keep going. Keep trying it.
Yeah, it's not my microphone. Okay. I want to see if Kevin has an update on any news in the past couple of days related to the $50 million Greater Arizona funding request.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to provide an update. And of course, we're well past the 100th day of session. The big deadline that the legislature has to work with every year is July 1st, where they need a state budget before the new state fiscal year starts. They typically finish closer to that 100-day mark, but with the very evenly split chamber or both chambers, that was incredibly difficult last year. They weren't able to enact a budget until June 30th, and as you know, we're already in June, and so it's very evident that the same challenges exist this year, and there are several controversial non-budget issues which are also complicating that process. But on the flip side, about a month and a half ago, their finance advisory committee met and indicated that they had a 5.3 billion balance to work with this year. That's 5.3 billion over what would be needed to keep current spending going forward. Since that time, just about a week and a half ago, the revenue numbers for April came out, and April was set a record for the state. It was the most revenue collected by the state in a month. It was just 2 billion, over 2 billion alone for April, which was 500 million above what was forecasted. So that earlier forecast of 5.3 billion is probably closer to 6 billion now. So there's a tremendous amount of revenue to work with. I think the fiscal conservatives are probably going to pare down spending, even though the revenue is available. But it looks very favorable that the local projects that Miles mentioned are going to be included at least in the budget proposal that leadership will release when they feel they are close to having the votes to pass the budget. But in addition to that, when we got that initial opposition to including local projects in the state budget, we quickly pivoted and developed a list of alternative state highway projects from across Greater Arizona for consideration. And with some of the recent discussions that I've had with legislative leadership and the staff that's actually drafting the budget, had a lot of questions about many of those state highway projects. So in addition to the local projects, I'm fairly confident that we're going to see quite a bit in the way of state highway projects included in this budget as well. So remains to be seen when we'll see that budget, but there'll be a tremendous amount of pressure to have that enacted by the end of the month. And with that, happy to answer any questions.
And Mr. Chair, I'd like to see if it's all right with you, see if there's any questions for Kevin and on this item before I move on to some of the other items in the staff report.
Not hearing any questions, so Miles, just continue.
Okay, thank you. So councils of government, COGS, and metropolitan planning organizations, MPOs, the directors have formed a task force to explore opportunities in the bipartisan infrastructure law. And our goal in setting this up was to come to a joint request that we could all agree to and what we asked ADOT to do. I drafted a resolution to make the case for a direct pass-through of certain amounts of funding to COGS and MPOs. And as you will recall from recent board meetings, I've put together a number of drafts of PowerPoint presentations, a lot of graphs and slides. And ultimately, in going through this process with other members of the task force and with staff, I've changed the format to be a resolution. And I'm going to go through that resolution with you in just a minute. I do want to point out that ADOT staff have been very accessible and responsive to requests. They have done at least 3 meetings with COG and MPO directors to share information on how they anticipate distributing funds. But in the resolution is probably the biggest piece of, advocacy or leadership that we will be doing. And I want to, in this meeting, I think it's really worth the time to take the board through it. I have a couple other quick notes before I get to the resolution, which is that we received a $160,000 grant in partnership with Mountain Line. That is new funding, and we're going to be managing it with Mountain Line in the coming year. And then later in this meeting, Mandia is going to be doing a report on safe streets for all. I see I've got a typo in my staff report here, and but Mandia is going to do that staff report a little bit later today. And for now, I'm going to scroll on down and share with you that I went through the resolution, draft resolution, with members of the task force, with members of the technical advisory committee, and with members of the management committee. And there was a lot of support for taking things in the resolution way. And I have to acknowledge, Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is without question the longest resolution I've ever written. And I anticipate that it will get thinner and more streamlined, hopefully, as time goes on. But the point here is to lead everybody, and particularly try to lead the state down a logical path, baby step by baby step by baby step, to a place that is just irrefutable. It just makes perfect sense and it's clear we need to do it. So I'm not an attorney. This one, there's a lot of language in here, and I'm going to go through this really in layperson's terms. But the first point, whereas Arizona is receiving $224 million in the first year of the bipartisan infrastructure law, that's going to increase to over $300 million over the next 5 years, every year. So well over $1 billion of additional funding coming into the state. And there are dozens of funding programs that the state's responsible for managing. And I want to be clear in the third bullet that, and I list out every COG and MPO by formal title, and really the last 2 lines of the third bullet say that we recognize and respect the limitations and challenges faced by ADOT. This is not an easy bill to manage, so we really want to be part of the solution and supporting ADOT, and wanted to make that point here. Also, the fourth bullet recognizes that the Casa Grande resolves, which is a document that was approved 20-some years ago, they guide and constrain the distribution of funds by the state of Arizona. The state is beholden to that distribution formula. And that would be a whole other staff report and work session to go into the Casa Grande resolves, I think. But for now, I think it's sufficient to say that it does guide the state's decisions. The next bullet is that, and I think this is a key point, whether funding is directly passed through to COGS and MPOs, or it's spent on our behalf by the state of Arizona, it does not impact the Casa Grande resolves. So it should be a non-issue for the state. The next bullet is that surface transportation block grant funding. So there's a whole lot of pots of funding in the bipartisan infrastructure law. Surface transportation block grant is one of the sources of funding. It is also subdivided, but it's the most flexible source of funding under federal law. And then I just go through and do the math. So whereas the state's going to get 218 million of STBG funding in 2022, and again, just going through the math, 88 million will stay with the state and they can spend it wherever they want. 68 million will go to MAG, Maricopa County, Maricopa Association of Governments. And 14 million will go to PAG, which is Pima Association of Governments. 12 million is apportioned in the Federal Register to areas with populations between 50 and 200,000. That's MetroPlan and other organizations our size. 10 million is for populations 5 to 50,000. And then the next bullet, 13 million, is for populations less than 5,000. Okay, so there's just so many different slicing and dicing on the funding sources, but these are very important because it totals 36 million to areas with population less than 200,000 that the federal government says this is where the money needs to go. And I'm just going to give you a little side note here that currently only 7 million, 7.8 million is coming to all of these areas. And the total in the Federal Register is 36 million. So next bullets are to make the point that all of the councils of government MPOs were all formed under federal, state, local regulations specifically to manage transportation funding in our jurisdictions. That is why we exist. And we have the legal capacity and authority to manage these funds. And then I want to make clear, ADOT has discretion to decide how these funds are distributed. It's absolutely ADOT's discretion. Okay, this is not something where I can go in or anyone can go in and say, ADOT, you have to do it this way because the law says so. The law says ADOT can do it however they think makes the most sense. Very important point. And then the last bullet on this page, makes the point that whether ADOT spends the money for us or ADOT sends the money through to us to spend, it does not increase the amount of money spent in these regions. It's just a matter of who is making the decisions on the projects the funding is spent on. So one way to say it is we're not asking for any more money. We're just asking you to let us decide the projects it's spent on instead of you deciding for us. That's going to be a key part of the advocacy.
Jeff, you're cutting out again. I wonder if you could turn your video off. Would that help? We can't hear you. Jeff, everything you said the last 2 or 3 minutes has not come through at all. Is there any way we can address that? In-person meetings. Is Jeff trying to get out and try to come back in or what?
It looks that way.
Okay, so we'll just wait a sec. Thank you, Mandia. So who is doing the screen? Is that Jeff? Because Miles, we can't hear anything, nothing.
Chair McCarthy, this is Rosie. I'm sharing the screen. Hopefully, maybe me sharing will help him keep
Yeah.
the signal a little bit better.
Yeah, maybe he can do the talking and you can do the
Navigating, yes.
navigating, yes. You know, another option is we could go to item F, which is safe streets and roads. Do that while he's trying to work out his technical problems.
That works for me.
Why don't we do that? Because it's been like 3 or 4 minutes.
No problem. I'm going to share my screen. So give me just a second here.
All right, so we're going to move on to item 3F, safe streets and roads for all.
Great. Thank you, Chair McCarthy. Can everyone see the screen okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, was recently released for the Safe Streets and Roads for All program, otherwise known as SS4A. And this program will provide $1 billion in competitive funds for fiscal year 22. And this program is funded through fiscal year 26. And just as a reminder, this program supports both planning and capital improvement projects that significantly reduce or eliminate roadway fatalities and serious injuries for all road users. As part of this program, there are 2 grants available. There's the Action Planning Grant, which can be used to develop, complete, or supplement a comprehensive safety action plan. And then there's the Implementation Grant, which funds projects that are identified in those existing comprehensive safety plans. And as you'll see on the screen, and for those of you who that are on the phone and can't see the screen, this information is also included in the staff report, but the award amounts are shown. And as you'll see, if Metro Plan were to lead an application, or if it were a joint application for a regionally scaled project, then the maximum award amounts increase. And of course, oops, excuse me, go back here. Importantly, applications are due in September, so that gives us a little bit of time to formulate our approach to this opportunity. This slide shows the selection criteria for each of the grant types. Selection criteria is obviously based on safety, and equity is an equally important scoring component. And just to reinforce what we already know, equity is a priority for the Biden-Harris administration. And we see this here and in many of the other federal competitive grants as well. Additionally, throughout the NOFO, policies and strategies around Vision Zero and complete streets are strongly encouraged and are even included in the grant eligibility checklist. So what you're seeing are just some policy examples. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list, and you'll notice that some of these policies overlap. And these are the types of policies and strategies that we do not have established in our existing safety plan, which is a good segue into our plan. Maybe you forgot we had one, but we do have a safety plan known as the Regional Strategic Transportation Safety Plan. It's a long name with an equally as long acronym of RSTSP. This plan was a joint effort that was led by the Northern Arizona Council of Governments, NACOG, Central Yavapai Metropolitan Planning Agency, SIMPO, and Metro Plan. And the plan was completed and adopted in 2018. The plan obviously identifies crash trends, locations, and provided project identification and proposed countermeasures. However, a secondary component of this plan was to evaluate potential projects that would qualify and be competitive for the Highway Safety Improvement Program funding, or HSIP funding. And a success of this plan was the city did apply and was awarded HSIP funds for the Lockett and Fourth Roundabout. And while our plan hits many of the requirements of a safety action plan, it does not meet the standards identified as part of the SS4A program. And upon completion or upon completing the SS4A eligibility assessment, our current plan would not qualify for planning or implementation grants based on the list that's shown on your screen. Once again, this list is also in the staff report. Of course, this isn't the best news, but we do have an approach that is currently evolving to set us up for future SS4A implementation grants. So we're approaching SS4A in two ways. First, the RSTSP is scheduled for an update starting in fiscal year 23, so it should kick off sometime this summer. And that update is already funded through HSIP funds that was received by NACOG. And this again is a joint planning process with NACOG and SIMPO. And updates to the RSTSP give us the opportunity to align the document to support all future grant opportunities. However, we are limited in how much we can adjust the scope to meet the SS4A requirements given costs and time associated with additional analyses and policy development. But collectively, we agreed with incorporating as much of SS4A into this process without overdoing the costs. One of the drawbacks to this approach is simply timing. Unfortunately, the update may not be completed until fiscal year 24, meaning that we can't compete for implementation grants until then. Our second approach is to apply for a fiscal year 22 grant to create a new action safety plan. This plan would focus on our most vulnerable road users, so pedestrians and bicyclists, and incorporate all of SS4A requirements and provide us with an implementation plan that could be ready for fiscal year 23. There may be some redundancies between the plans, but the RSTSP will continue to look at all modes across our regional system, whereas the new plan would be more focused and will complement the city's active transportation master plan. And these approaches were discussed with the TAC last week, and they were very supportive of this idea of a new safety action plan. And I am done with my presentation, and I was going to check in and see if Miles had anything additional to add to this, if he's able to, but we can certainly try to take questions as well.
Miles, do you have any
Mr. Chairman, yeah,
comments? Yeah, on this item, and then we'll go back to where
thank
you
you,
were.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Mandia, no, I do not have anything to add except appreciation to Mandia for the work that she's doing on this item.
Do we have any questions from the board members? All right, Mandia, thank you for jumping in like that.
Of course.
Miles, I guess we'll go back to federal and state funding, and you were going over the draft resolution. Incidentally, will that be brought back to us in September for a possible approval by the board? Jeff, are you there? I can't hear you. Actually, I don't hear anything from anybody. Can somebody, Patrice or
Yeah, I'm
somebody?
here. I'm here.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you.
Austin's there. You know,
Here.
Sudden, I
All
don't
right,
know if
good.
people are on Suddenlink, but Suddenlink has had problems lately, so. And I've been, my internet is slow. I'm at home and near downtown and it's slow, so. Doesn't surprise me he's having some problems today.
All right, well, all of the items that are on the agenda, pretty much, not all, but almost all, are ones that Miles is going to talk to us about. One option is we could go into e-session and talk about his contract, because he won't be in that, at least for the first part of it.
That might be a great
What
idea.
if Miles
Jim.
calls? What if
Oops.
Miles calls in?
Yeah, that's another idea if you can call in.
Right.
I'm on the phone. I'm somewhere outside of Tonopah, Nevada right now.
Tonopah, Nevada.
Sigue modificaciones como las y finalmente registro.
Okay, we're getting nowhere with Miles. If he can, hopefully he can try. I think what I would like to do is move to item 8.
Cuando el ejército estadounidense estaba matando.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
it's Regina. Since we have Mr. Kevin Adam of RTAC here with us, perhaps Kevin could share something about the discussions with RTAC on the governor's budget and the infra, along with the 50 million smart fund. Kevin, if you could just kind of echo what you shared with RTAC board with regard to those items.
Mr. Cherry, I'd be happy to. And, you know, as indicated before, there's a tremendous amount of available revenue that the legislature has to work with this year. And they have prioritized transportation infrastructure as one of the chief priorities with this budget. So we're fully confident that we'll see quite a bit included. Going back to January, when the governor issued his budget proposal, he had two main transportation items that were included. The first being $400 million to assist with the completion of the widening of I-10 between Phoenix and Tucson to a minimum of 3 lanes in each direction for that entire length. That has since already been enacted. They expedited that enactment so that that funding could be included as part of ADOT's mega grant application for an additional $300 million for this one remaining 26-mile segment between Casa Grande and Chandler. The governor's proposal also included $50 million for the this new smart fund that he is proposing that Councilmember Salas mentioned. And this $50 million would provide application assistance as well as local match funding for all of these federal competitive grants. And the eligible applicants would just be from Greater Arizona. So 40% of that revenue would be available to the 13 rural counties, 40% to the municipalities in Greater Arizona, and then the remaining 20% would be retained by ADOT, but could only be used for projects, for state projects that are in Greater Arizona. And it's highly anticipated that that 50 million program will also be included in the budget. So I think that's very innovative with the national organizations that I've talked with. I'm not aware of any other states that are proposing this type of program, but I think it's a terrific idea as far as making sure that we maximize our opportunities to bring in this additional federal funding, particularly for the rural and small metropolitan areas across the state. So that is something else that we're anxiously awaiting to see its inclusion. But in talking with legislative leadership and the governor's staff, it's another one, there's a real high confidence level as far as this being included.
all right.
Thank you, Kevin. I think another note worthy of mentioning is, and Kevin could add more details on this information is, the Arizona Commerce Authorities,
Oh, Regina, let me interject here for a minute.
mhm,
I think we're going to run out of time on this meeting. Jeff is ready to come back in.
okay.
And some of the things you're asking about, they're really not on the agenda. So,
Well, they're
uh,
part of the state and federal funding. Well,
okay,
specific
they
state
are.
funding, yes.
So why don't we go back to Jeff? Jeff, can you hear me?
I can, and can you hear me?
We can. And I'll just say that, you know, we're over an hour into this meeting. We may have to delete a couple items. I'll leave that up to you. I do want to get at some point down to the e-session on your renewing your contract because we need to do that today. We don't have any choice in that.
Right,
So
thank you.
I'll give it back to you, but again, we're going to have to kind of watch the clock here a little bit. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, I understand. And let me say, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Mandy, Kevin, thank you for adjusting to make this work. I apologize for the poor connectivity I've got here. I've done everything I can at this point. So I believe that I can get through this verbally and that we can move pretty quickly on the remaining items. Rosie has page 29 up on the screen. And this is the agenda item related to the resolution. I'm just going to finish up the case that I'm making here. And I want to answer a question that I heard Chair McCarthy ask just a few minutes ago. Am I going to bring this resolution back for formal approval by this board? And the answer is yes. As it continues to be refined, my intention is absolutely to bring it back and to get your support and actually to have every COG and NPO in the state sign it. So I'm going to go back to near the top of this page that's up on the screen. It says the state's going to retain authority for $88 million. And I'm pointing out that it's a 5-year bill. So 5 years of funding. And pointing out that the state has a census formula to calculate and distribute funds. They've got math that they use. And want to make clear that COGS and MPOs can apportion funds to state highways and facilities. And this point is a key one because the state might say, well, we might want to use some of these funds on state facilities. Well, the point is you can. You participate in our processes, you're on our board, you're on our TAC. So you can still put the money towards state facilities. And just moving through this in the spirit of what the chair just said, I'll just cut to the punchline here near the bottom, which is essentially this resolution asks for 100% of this STBG, Surface Transportation Block Grant funding, to be apportioned to COGS and MPOs around the state, to be directly passed through so that we can spend it on our projects. And where we're at with this is I will tell you that I've got preliminary support from the executive directors of Maricopa County and Pima County Association of Governments to take this approach. And that's a really good sign for us because if we can all work on it together and make a request of ADOT together, we're going to be much better off than going alone. So there's quite a bit more to do, but of the long-term impacts of having a more consistent formula funding source could certainly benefit MetroPlan and other COGS and MPOs around the state. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm not asking for any action. I just wanted to update the board on this item, and I would turn it back to you and the board.
Thank you, Miles. Do we have any questions from board members?
Mr. Chair, I have a quick comment.
Please go ahead.
Yes, first I'd like to recognize and uplift the leadership of Miles, who is actually appointed the chair of the statewide task force composed of MPOs and COGS in the RTAC and MAG and PAG in coming up with this statewide kind of advocacy to convince ADOT to to deliver more funding to MPOs and COGS, whether it's MAGPAG and the MPOs and COGS within RTAC, and that's in the last 3 bullet points in the draft resolution. And in the same breath, I also recognize and lift up Kevin Adams' leadership on RTAC, because it was actually through his effort when we had a discussion with Katie Proctor, who is the CFO of ADOT, who did a presentation earlier this year, where we realized that formula funding has been kind of identified and pretty much set in stone for more than 20, 30 years, and that need to change. So just recognizing Kevin's leadership and Miles' leadership in this statewide effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ellis. Any other comments? I'm not hearing any. So Miles, let's go on to item C, which is a fiscal year budget. And you're asking us to adopt that today. Go ahead.
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if I could just say thank you for the compliments about leadership, Councilmember Salas. I wish my leadership influence extended to Wi-Fi signals, but it doesn't. So I will continue on here with the budget. I am requesting the board adopt a $2.2 million budget for fiscal year 23. This item was reviewed with the board last month. And like all organizations that you're familiar with, we adopt the budget every year. We provide a 5-year look, so you have a sense that and can see that our budget is sustainable. The budget's pretty simple. I want to point out, as you look at the numbers a little bit further in the report, salary and benefit ERE budget increases due to salary and benefit adjustments. Want to be clear, no additional staff are budgeted to be hired. I want to recognize Rosie in helping us decrease our operating budget and saving funding and insurance and legal fees. Pointing out that the travel budget is increasing because we're returning to travel. We did add a staff person, and we're also paying for some of the travel expenses of board members. And then we apportion funds for capital projects throughout the year, projects that we've been discussing, and we will discuss more in the strategic work plan. So I'm going to just scroll down here to this 1-page budget. Well, I can't scroll down to it, Rosie. I'm going to ask you to keep scrolling, and you can see the fiscal year 23 draft budget and 5-year plan. And a couple points I want to make on this. Fiscal year 23 draft budget is the center column. It's 2.2 million in revenue and 2.2 million in expenses, which is exactly what you would expect. I do want to point out the last column, which says fund balance. And staff set a goal of having $100,000 fund balance, which would allow us to just keep working for 3 months if there was a big problem. For the next 5 years, we're able to maintain roughly a $200,000 fund balance. So we're in good shape. And with that, Mr. Chairman, there's a line item budget that follows. We can go into detail as much as you like, but I am asking the board to adopt the budget at this time.
Board members, do you have any questions or comments, or is anyone willing to make a motion?
Chairman McCarthy, I move to approve the recommended budget as presented by Miles.
Is that Mr. Williams?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Get a second.
I'll second.
Sounds like Regina Salas got the second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Now we're down to item D, which is the work plan review. Again, we needed to adopt the strategic work plan. So Miles, this one's yours also.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board. We also reviewed this last month, and just a couple of changes are highlighted in the staff report. Small item of making the report consistent with, a dating format. But then item number 18, which is substantive. And Rosie, I'm going to ask you to scroll down to page 40, I believe, of the packet, which shows the 18 items in the strategic plan. I went through these line by line last month, and Rosie has already highlighted number 18. This is the one that's changed. So striving to build a better relationship with ADOT, and we made this one measurable, inviting the ADOT Director's Office to serve on the Metro Plan Management Committee. So inviting John Halikowski or somebody from his staff to participate with us every month with the city manager, county manager, NAPTA CEO director. And I think that will be a very helpful addition to our relationship building. And I will say that the TAC members were supportive of this approach as well, and particularly the ADOT staff. Other than that, though, Mr. Chairman, I know I wasn't able to attend the last board meeting, but in the interest of time, I really feel I have to add anything else. The items are pretty self-explanatory, and I would request that the board consider adopting this item today.
Thank you, Miles. Do we have any questions or comments or a motion to approve the 2022-2023 strategic work plan?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the 2022-23 strategic work plan.
Thank you, Ms. Salas. Get a second?
A second.
That's Geronimo Vasquez.
Mhm.
Thank you. Do we have any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? So that motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much. All right. So the last item before we go to e-session, the last item of significance anyway, is item E, which is Stride Forward, Regional Transportation Plan Update. Miles, this one's yours also. This is an information only item.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is one that Dave Wessel reports on pretty much every month. There's a lot happening with Stride Forward. Dave is not able to be here today, and the staff report he wrote, though, lines out essentially what I will say is that we are on time and on budget. We're still moving ahead to have this adopted before the end of this calendar year. And the summer season, we're going to be going in depth on more public outreach and getting feedback on draft plans. And our goal is to be able to bring to you in September the onward concept, which is what the system will look like if we build it out on the trajectory basically we're currently on. That means approvals of Proposition 419, approvals of projects that are already in the hopper. And then we also have the upward concept, and that's where we do whatever we can to reach the carbon neutrality goals and sustainability goals that the city of Flagstaff has adopted. So one approach is to build a system based on what's been approved and move that forward. And the other is to say, what are the benchmarks we want to meet? And what does the system have to look like to meet those benchmarks? And really that's the essence of it. And if the board has questions or wants to go deeper, please let me know.
Do we have any questions or comments? I'm not hearing any, so we'll move on the agenda. Item F, safe streets and roads for all. We've already covered that while we're in the middle of our internet fiascos. So, Miles, we're down to item G, which is items from the staff. And then,
Thank you.
okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and I can be very quick here. I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize Rick Barrett, who has been with the city of Flagstaff, most recently the city engineer. He's been with the city though for 40 years. He's retiring, and just want to recognize he's been with Metro Plan since before it was Metro Plan, and the MPO since before it existed. So really going to miss him and want to wish him well. Also, the downtown mile update, the city has submitted a grant. I know city council members are aware of this, a $65 million grant in great partnership with BNSF Railroad to work on downtown mile projects. And I want to recognize just the work that Christine Cameron, as well as many others, did at the city to get that grant submitted. And then the Lone Tree Planning Environmental Review, PEL, just a quick reminder, that is a project Metro Plan is doing to get clearance, more environmental clearance, so that we're more competitive for federal grants. And that's something that Mandia has been working on, and it continues to progress. And that concludes my report on those items, Mr. Chairman.
I have a couple comments before I open it up to the board. The Lone Tree planning, is that for the South Lone Tree, just from like I-40 and north?
No, it's a very, Mr. Chair, members of the board, it's a very small section of the Lone Tree corridor from Zuni to J.W. Powell.
Okay. And then the other thing I'll add is that regarding Rick Barrett, in 40 years, on June 9th at 3 o'clock at Fox Glen Park, they're having a little party for Rick, and I'm sure anyone on this board would be welcome to that. I plan on going. All right, do I have any other comments or questions from board members on this item? All right, I'm not hearing any. So what I'm going to suggest is that we go into executive session to discuss Mr. Melbeck's contract. This is, so I move that we move into an E-session, A4, for contract negotiations. Could I get a second?
Second.
Ms. Horstman gives us a second. Discussion? All in favor, please say
Yeah, I'd
aye.
like to know how
Aye.
Jim, I'd like to know how I stay involved being on the phone.
Okay, let's finish this motion and then I'll address that.
And Jim, if I may, and I should have looked at this. This is, I assume, under one, isn't it, under personnel?
I guess it could be. I thought it was contract negotiations.
Yeah, no, I think this is personnel. It's under A1.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So, but the motion is just to go into executive session.
Okay,
So,
perfect. No problem.
all right. Let's have the vote on this, but then stay online, and then we'll have a very brief discussion about the logistics of how to get over to E-session. So all those in favor of going to E-session, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, we will go into E-session now because that was unanimous. Rosie, can you address the questions of how to, as a person on the phone, get over there? Or how we all get over there?
Mr. Chair, I have you all ready to go over to a breakout room. And I can send you over there as soon as you're ready. One note, participants can return to the main session at any time. I would assume that only applies to those connected via the web. So if Rhonda needs to come back or you need to come back and get another participant, you are welcome to do so. So at your, when you say go, I will open the room and you can begin your e-session.
That will appear on our screen. And Rhonda, did you have a comment before we go over?
I was just wanting to make sure, is it Jesse on the phone and,
Austin Aslan.
okay,
Those
so
two.
the 928-220, sorry, let me lower my hand. 5936 is Councilmember Ostlin.
Correct, Austin.
If that's what you say.
No, I don't think so. First of all, Austin's got his name up.
Right, and then I see Jesse Thompson is on the phone, and then there's another phone number, but that's person's not identified.
Whoever is 220-5936.
I think that might be me, Linda Curley from Judy McGay's office.
Okay, great.
Okay, so the alternates do not go over to e-session.
That would be correct.
All right, I believe we are ready to transfer over. Thank you. Go ahead.
So Linda Curley, you are not going to be able to go over since you're here for Judy and Judy's the alternate. So you aren't going to be able to join us in e-session.
That's fine.
Thanks, Linda.
Austin Aslan. It looks like we're still waiting for Austin Aslan and Jesse Thompson. Okay, we have Jesse Thompson.
I'm here.
Yes, Austin Aslan we have. All right. So we are back out of e-session. We're still on item H. What's the executive director's contract negotiation and renewal? And based on the discussion we had in e-session, I will move that we approve the draft contract with Mr. Mailback as presented to the board and with option B, which was the only decision point left in the contract, with option B. Could I get a second on that?
Second.
Ms. Horstman seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. So I will talk to our attorney and have him formalize the agreement that we've already got in draft form and coordinate that with staff and Mr. Mailback. So that's the end of the action required by this board. All right, we're down to closing items. And I'll go around the board. And just for fun, we'll do it in reverse order of the that we normally do. Mr. Thompson, do you have anything to or from the board informally?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I got a call, a couple of contacted two individuals, and I know this is probably pertaining to the county. The road coming from Loop to Flagstaff, they're very uncomfortable with the speed limit that is posted. So they wanted to know how to get that to the appropriate agency or to the department. I did direct them to go to Coconino County Administration to get proper direction. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Ms. Horstman, did you want to make a brief comment on that?
Jesse, is that Navajo Route 15 you're referring to? I think it is.
Yeah, well, actually, that's part of it from the reservation line on this way. from there on towards Loop, there's, I believe, about 65. But from there, from the reservation on this way, I think it's posted at 50.
Navajo Route 15, of course, is under the jurisdiction of the Navajo Nation, but anything outside of the Navajo Res line would be county. So you might.
Yes, that is the one that they're referring to.
You may want to refer them to Public Works.
Okay, sounds good. That's all the direction I needed.
All right, thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Thompson. Regina Salas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad to inform the board that the recent Rural Transportation Advocacy Council, I was elected as vice chair of RTAC. And also reminding the board that we have an invitation to attend the Rural Transportation Summit on September 14 and 15. I believe Miles has sent that email last week or two ago. And the early bird registration ends end of July. So please let Miles know if you wish to attend. It will be at the Action Casino in Maricopa, and is hosted by our colleagues from the Central Arizona Governments and Sun Corridor Metropolitan Planning Organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Mr. Williams.
Chairman McCarthy, members of the board, I do not have any announcements or items of concern to share today, so I yield my time.
All right, thank you. Mr. Aslan.
Nothing. I did want to just make sure that MetroPlan staff leadership was aware. Like the past couple of weeks, member of City Council has been updating Council with regards to something that's happening with Mount Line and an effort to put in a stoplight at Phoenix and Route 66 for the transportation center, the transportation hub, the connection center. And ADOT has denied the request and then upheld the denial upon appeal. And I just want to make sure MetroPlan's aware of what's going on. I can totally understand why Mount Line is interested in a light there. I think I can also see why ADOT is denying the request in terms of level of service to that corridor and with the train overpass right there. I don't know if anyone's allowed to comment on that during this to-from experience, but just to make sure you're aware of it, you don't necessarily need to follow up with me about it. I'm just throwing it out there. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Horstman.
Yes, thank you. And I really, other than to say that congratulations to Regina for her election and for her leadership and ability to take a leadership position. I really appreciate that. And number two, I'm very pleased. Yes, exactly, Tony. And I'm very pleased that we have been able to successfully negotiate the continuation of Miles' contract. And I look forward to an excellent new year with Miles Malbec in charge. So always good news. This was a good meeting. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Vasquez.
Thank you. Congratulations, Miles. I'm glad we finally got through this. It seemed like it took forever, but I think we got a quality contract. And so I'm really happy for you and grateful for your leadership and looking forward to moving forward. I am planning on attending the September meeting. And then just on the flip side, just on countywide whatnot, we are having 3 volunteer days through United Way. The next 2 Saturdays out tunnel fire, removing debris. You can register through United Way Saturday morning or Saturday all day, June 4th and June 11th. And then also We will be having June 18th, a volunteer day in the Sunnyside at the Main Street Trailers to help redo the sandbags there. So if you know anybody that would be interested in volunteering, or if you could spread the word, we'd really appreciate it, because we have this month to really push to get sandbags prepared and ready, because the rains come in July. So we really need that support. But other than that, like I said, congratulations, Miles, and I really appreciate meeting. Thank you, Chair, for running the meetings. I know, especially with this contract, it was very time consuming and involved, and appreciate your leadership on it. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you. I guess I could talk for about 11 minutes and we'd still get out here on time, but I won't do that. I don't have anything today. I just want to thank everybody. I think we had a perfect attendance, which is just wonderful. And I really do appreciate everyone. Our next meeting will not be until September 1st at 1 o'clock because it's like summer break. So don't show up in July or August, but September 1st, yes, please come. Put it on your calendars. I'll just open up one, if anybody any last minute comments. If not, I'm going to adjourn us. All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.